Welcome to this Tuesday edition of Market Mantra, the program in which we give you a complete update on the economic, business and stock market news of the day. My name is V. Ravi Kumar and with me is my Hindi co-anchor Vishal Sharma.
नमस्कार, मार्केट मंत्र में आप सभी का स्वागत। आधे घंटे के इस कार्यक्रम में लाएंगे आप तक देश और दुनिया से आर्थिक, व्यापारिक और शेयर बाजार के ताजा समाचार, साथ ही उन पर चर्चा भी करेंगे। चर्चा के लिए आज कार्यक्रम में ऑनलाइन आमंत्रित हैं वरिष्ठ आर्थिक पत्रकार सुषमा रामचंद्रन। सुषमा जी से जब हमारा संपर्क होगा तब आप उनको चर्चा करेंगे। जी सुषमा जी हमसे फोन लाइन पर जुड़ गई हैं। सुषमा जी नमस्कार, स्टूडियो में कार्यक्रम में आपका स्वागत।
नमस्कार, थैंक यू।
और सबसे पहले हेडलाइंस के साथ हैं वी रवि कुमार।
Domestic stocks logged modest gains. Sensex closes above 54,750 points. Nifty settles near 16,350 level. The rupee appreciates to 79 rupees and 95 paise against the US dollar. Global share markets witnessed losses and Brent crude prices hover around $105 per barrel mark.
घरेलू शेयर बाजारों में हल्की बढ़त दर्ज। सेंसेक्स 54,750 से ऊपर और निफ्टी 16,350 के करीब हुआ बंद। रुपया मजबूत होकर $1 की तुलना में $79.95 प्रति डॉलर के स्तर पर हुआ बंद। वैश्विक शेयर बाजारों में रही गिरावट और ब्रेंट कच्चे तेल की कीमतें $105 प्रति बैरल के आसपास। सबसे पहले बात शेयर बाजार की। प्रमुख घरेलू शेयर सूचकांकों सेंसेक्स और निफ्टी में आज हल्की बढ़त दर्ज हुई। वैश्विक शेयर बाजारों में कमजोरी के बावजूद दोनों सूचकांक बढ़त में रहे। सेंसेक्स 54,750 अंक से ऊपर, जबकि निफ्टी 16,350 के स्तर पर करीब आकर बंद हुआ। बॉम्बे स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का सेंसेक्स 0.45% की वृद्धि से 246 अंक उछलकर 54,768 पर बंद हुआ। नेशनल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का निफ्टी भी 0.38% की वृद्धि से 62 अंक बढ़कर 16,341 पर पहुंच गया। व्यापक बाजार की बात करें तो बीएसई मिड कैप इंडेक्स में 0.68% का उछाल आया, जबकि स्मॉल कैप इंडेक्स 0.88% की बढ़त के साथ बंद हुआ।
The Sensex and the Nifty today logged modest gains. Both stock indices added even as global share markets were negative. The Sensex closed above the 54,750 points mark, while the Nifty finished near 16,350 level. The Sensex surged 246 points or 0.45% to finish at 54,768. The Nifty also rose 62 points or 0.38% to end at 16,341. In the broader market at the BSE, the mid cap climbed 0.68%, while the small cap index ended 0.88% up. In the Sensex pack, 20 companies posted gains while 10 logged losses. Axis Bank was the top gainer as it climbed 2.4%, IndusInd Bank added 2.1%, Mahindra & Mahindra rose 2%, and Tata Steel ended 1.7% up. On the other hand, Nestle India tumbled 1.3%, HCL declined 1.9%, Sun Pharma fell 0.9%, and Kotak Bank ended 0.7% down. In sectoral indices at BSE, 18 sectors gained, except oil and gas sector, which lost 0.3%. Power sector climbed 2.7%, and bank sector gained 1%. Auto index rose 0.9%, and metal sector surged 0.8%. The overall breadth of the BSE trade was positive as shares of 1,975 companies gained while 1,337 fell. Shares of 142 companies remained unchanged. Sushma ji, how do you see the market movement today? Modest gains, but rupee worries remain?
Yes, of course, the rupee worries remain, but it is the third day of the rally, and that, of course, is good news. Clearly, the markets are factoring into the fact that the economic fundamentals, domestic economic fundamentals, are on a strengthening trend. Of course, the day before, the rally was in line with the global markets going up, but this time, today, the global markets have shown a dip, but even so, we have upswing bullish trend in the Indian market. So that is once again, as I said, positive, but they have probably taken into account that some of the global data, for instance, the U.S. economic data is showing very strong retail sales. So that's again a positive. We have seen that we talked about the rupee. The rupee depreciation has actually led to a rally as far as the IT sector is concerned. because the rupee depreciation, though it does make our imports expensive and has for certain other disadvantages, but on the export side, it always makes exports more competitive. So the IT sector, which is involved in a very large volume of services exports, always tends to go up when there is depreciation in the rupee, and that has happened once again. So I think this is a rally which seems to be focused more on the domestic economic fundamentals.
जी सुषमा जी, आज मिड कैप इंडेक्स में 0.68% की बढ़त रही है और स्मॉल कैप इंडेक्स 0.88% की बढ़त के साथ बंद हुआ है। यहाँ पर भी अगर हम ब्रॉडर मार्केट की बात करें तो अच्छा प्रदर्शन रहा है। मिड कैप और स्मॉल कैप इंडेक्स जो मौजूदा जो परिस्थितियां हैं, जो वैश्विक आर्थिक परिदृश्य है, उसमें मिड कैप और स्मॉल कैप इंडेक्स में आप आगे का क्या भविष्य देखती हैं अभी?
देखिए, मिड कैप और स्मॉल कैप में मेरे ख्याल में आउटलुक बहुत अच्छा है, क्योंकि इस वक्त जो आर्थिक स्थिति है रिकवरी के पाथ पे चल रहा है हमारी इकोनॉमी, और इसमें मिड कैप और स्मॉल कैप जो मीडियम साइज और छोटी कंपनीज होती हैं, उनका जो रिस्पांस होता है रिकवरी में वो ज्यादा फास्ट होता है। और इसमें कुछ आंकड़े आए हैं जैसे हायरिंग के, और हायरिंग ज्यादातर छोटी कंपनीज और मिड कैप कंपनीज में ज्यादा होती है। हायरिंग भी तेजी से चल रही है, और अगर आप देखें अभी आगे वाले दिनों में फेस्टिवल टाइम में लगता है कि डिमांड भी बढ़ जाएगी। इस वक्त अनुमान यही लगाया जा रहा है कि खरीफ हार्वेस्ट अच्छा होगा, मॉनसून अच्छी रही है, इनफैक्ट ज्यादा ही अच्छी रही है, बाढ़ है सब बहुत ज्यादा जगहों में, लेकिन हार्वेस्ट का जो एक्सपेक्टेशन है वो अच्छा है। तो इसमें जो जितना जल्दी फायदा होता है वो मीडियम और छोटी कंपनीज में होता है, और मेरे ख्याल में इसका फायदा ये मिड कैप और ये स्मॉल कैप में होगा। जी,
और सेक्टर वाइज अगर आप देखें तो आज पावर सेक्टर इंडेक्स में 2.7% की आज बढ़ोतरी दर्ज हुई है। पावर सेक्टर की अगर हम बात करें तो आने वाले समय में क्या आपको लगता है कि ये पावर सेक्टर में निवेश की दृष्टि से बहुत ही आकर्षक बनने वाला है?
देखिए, पावर सेक्टर की कुछ खामियां रही हैं। पिछले 6 महीने में हमारी पावर शॉर्टेजेस काफी रही है। ये इस वजह से है क्योंकि कोयले की शॉर्टेजेस रही हैं, लेकिन अभी मेरे ख्याल में ये जो सारी प्रॉब्लम्स थी, ये मिसमैच डिमांड और सप्लाई की, वो कुछ लगता है कि ठीक हो गई है, और पावर सेक्टर का जो अभी जनरेटिंग कैपेसिटी है वो भी बढ़ रही है, और मेरे ख्याल में आउटलुक अच्छा है।
If you look at, we were discussing that one of the worries that remains is the rupee here for the stock market. They look at it. There are few events that are lined up in the times to come. One is, of course, this week, the ECB, after 2011, after almost a decade, they are set to raise their interest rates. Then we have 26th and 27th where the Fed, most likely 75 basis points, but you never know, it could be 100 basis points as well. There's an increase happening there as well. And then finally the MPC in India will meet on 2nd to 4th August, so there might be an increase probably there as well. So you have these 3 events back to back. Probably there will be competitive increases happening across the world in all central banks. How do you see this competitive raising of interest rates across the world by central banks impacting the Indian stock markets?
Well, first of all, this is something that is to be expected. Now, for instance, in the case of the Federal Reserve, they have announced that we are going to do aggressive rate hikes, and so we are well aware of it. And the impact on the Indian stock markets of the Federal Reserve is already evident. In the current year, that is in 2022, already about $30 billion of assets have been sold by the FIIs, and that much of money has exited Indian markets. So we've already had that level of impact. As far as coming to Europe is concerned, this is something, as you rightly pointed out, after about 11 years that they are going ahead with the rate hike. So that will also definitely have some impact on the Indian stock market. Coming to the Indian central bank deciding, here again, we have been forewarned. The central bank has, made it very clear that they are going to continue with the process of raising rates, given the inflationary pressures. But one positive as far as India is concerned is that we have, if you see the progress of inflation, headline inflation, it's about 7.7 in April, 7.04 in May, and 7.01, maybe marginal, but it's still declining. It's a declining trend. Whereas if you see in Europe as well as the US, it's rushing up to 9.1%, 8.8%, very high levels of inflation over there. So I think perhaps we can pat ourselves a bit on the back that the policymakers here, whether it is the central government or the central bank, have been able to contain the inflationary pressures. But yes, the impact on the stock markets will be there of the continued rate hikes. I think it is, as I pointed out, the stock market rally has, hinged largely on domestic economic data coming in. The positive data of the fragile, but we have a recovery, maybe fragile, maybe a bit uneven, but it is a recovery, and we are steadily moving to, of course, as everyone says, the fastest growing economy in the world.
And if you look at the headwinds that we also been talking on Market Mantra for a long time, not a long time, at least a quarter now, and most experts have been talking about it, things like inflation, recession,
yes,
high commodity prices, Fed tightening, Russia, Ukraine. So they've all seemed to have been priced in by the market. But are there any headwinds that the market should watch out for?
Well, I think there's nothing beyond this. I think one of the things is that, as you rightly said, they have been factored in by the market. And some of them, in fact, have already, there's an improvement. If you see, I talked about inflation just now, commodity prices, global commodity prices are actually declining. Even crude oil prices, which are now about $105 to $106, I mean, they were much higher immediately after the Ukraine war. And about 2 or 3 days ago, they had gone below $100. So, and similarly in metals, there is the sharp hikes that were there have now moderated, which is, of course, about a benefit to all our manufacturers over here. So these headwinds, I think these headwinds have not changed. They remain. They are an issue of concern, of course. But I think what is interesting is probably that the markets have factored it in. And the other thing which is very significant is that if you compare the movement of stock markets now as compared to in 2008 when there was that taper tantrum, the reaction, the fall in the rupee which was there then is not as sharp. It's not as sharp now. Our foreign exchange reserves are of course much better. We're in a much better position to face this situation.
जी, और अब घरेलू मुद्रा के प्रदर्शन पर नजर डाल लेते हैं। विदेशी मुद्रा बाजार में रुपया आज 3 पैसे मजबूत होकर $1 की तुलना में ₹79.95 के स्तर पर बंद हुआ। विश्व की 6 प्रमुख मुद्राओं की तुलना में डॉलर की मजबूती दर्शाने वाला डॉलर इंडेक्स अंतर्देशीय कारोबार में 0.85% गिरकर 106.46 के स्तर पर कारोबार कर रहा था।
You mentioned, Sushma, the today, of course, what Vishal just read, rupee seems to have snapped a 7-day losing streak, recovering somewhat. But of course, if you look at it, the broader thing, the dollar, which is the reserve currency, is strengthening. And most of the commodities, including oil, are denominated in dollars. So when that happens, as the dollar becomes stronger, the commodity prices will come down. So is that something good for inflation? Of course, it's not good for other things, but with inflation, that's a good thing that the dollar continues to strengthen.
Yes, in a sense, of course, that is definitely there. But as far, once again, coming back to rupee depreciation, yes, of course, it is marginally good for inflationary pressures. But coming back to the rupee, I think one that is interesting thing that has happened is that mechanism has now been created so that the rupee can be traded globally, at least with Russia, to tackle the issue of having to buy crude and other things that we are now interested in getting from Russia, which is facing sanctions, obviously, from Western countries. So that, of course, is a positive for the rupee, but of course it is under pressure, and I think the central bank has taken the stance that we're not going to stop the depreciation of the rupee, but we are going to make sure that it does not crash precipitously, and we will make sure that it's a gradual decline, because there is a feeling that there is a perception that the rupee currently is overvalued. It really needs to come down to probably 81. I think that's the level that people are talking about. And of course, we have to remember that the rupee is still, it's not it's of course depreciating against the dollar index, but it has been appreciating against other currencies, like whether the euro or the pound or the yen. And that is, of course, again in line with what is happening in other countries. I think India is not the only country which is facing depreciation of its currency right now.
Right. We will continue discussing the top business stories of the day on Market Mantra with Sushma Ramachandran, but on the other side of this break.
उपभोक्ताओं तक पहुंचने का सुलभ और सस्ता माध्यम है आकाशवाणी।
आकाशवाणी के विभिन्न केंद्रों से कीजिए अपने उत्पादों और सेवाओं का प्रचार विज्ञापनों के माध्यम से।
लोकल और राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर कीजिए अपने बिजनेस का विस्तार, क्योंकि आकाशवाणी में विज्ञापन बुकिंग हुई बहुत ही आसान।
अब घर, दफ्तर या दुकान पर बैठे बैठे आप कर सकते हैं विज्ञापनों की बुकिंग।
डायल कीजिए 870-001-4242।
नंबर एक बार फिर नोट करें, 870-001-4242।
कार्यक्रम मार्केट मंत्र में आप सभी का फिर स्वागत। सरकार ने आज कहा कि डॉलर की तुलना में रुपए के कमजोर होने के पीछे रूस यूक्रेन संघर्ष, कच्चे तेल की बढ़ती कीमतें, खराब वैश्विक वित्तीय स्थितियां सहित कई वैश्विक कारण हैं। वित्त राज्य मंत्री पंकज चौधरी ने राज्यसभा में बताया कि ब्रिटिश पाउंड, जापानी येन और यूरो जैसी अन्य मुद्राएं डॉलर के मुकाबले रुपए की तुलना में अधिक कमजोर हुई हैं। रुपए को मजबूत करने के उपायों के बारे में उन्होंने कहा कि रिजर्व बैंक ने हाल के महीनों में ब्याज दरों में बढ़ोतरी की है, जिससे देश में और प्रवासी भारतीयों में रुपए का आकर्षण बढ़ा है। श्री चौधरी ने कहा कि रिजर्व बैंक विदेशी मुद्रा बाजार पर लगातार नजर रखता है और अत्यधिक उतार चढ़ाव की स्थिति में हस्तक्षेप भी करता है। केंद्रीय मंत्री ने कहा कि रुपए के अवमूल्यन से निर्यात प्रतिस्पर्धा को बढ़ावा मिलता है, जिससे अर्थव्यवस्था पर सकारात्मक प्रभाव होता है। मुद्रा के अवमूल्यन से आयात की लागत भी बढ़ जाती है। सुषमा जी, केंद्रीय वित्त राज्य मंत्री ने जो आज कहा कि रुपए के अवमूल्यन से निर्यात प्रतिस्पर्धा को बढ़ावा मिलता है और रिजर्व बैंक लगातार इस पर नजर रखे हुए है और इसके उपाय भी कर रहा है, तो ये जो निर्यात प्रतिस्पर्धा को बढ़ावा मिलता है, निर्यात पर बहुत ही सकारात्मक असर देखने को मिलेगा जैसे जैसे रुपया की ये जो स्थिति हो रही है इस समय।
जी बिल्कुल, इसका फायदा जरूर निर्यात को मिलेगा। और जैसे मैंने पहले कहा कि आईटी क्षेत्र में हमने आज देखा कि वहां पर रैली हुई है आईटी स्टॉक्स की, और ये इसी वजह से है क्योंकि आईटी कंपनीज जो है वो सर्विसेज एक्सपोर्ट्स बहुत बड़े वॉल्यूम में करती हैं और उनकी जो आमदनी है वो ज्यादा हो जाएगी। तो इसका तो इनफैक्ट कुछ अगर आप देखें अंतर्राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर कुछ देश ऐसे हैं जैसे चीन जो अपनी करेंसी जानबूझ के डिप्रिशिएट करती है ताकि उनको एक्सपोर्ट्स में फायदा हो। तो ये इस सिलसिले में शायद हमने अपने देश में ज्यादा इसके बारे में चर्चा नहीं की है कि रुपया का जो डिप्रिसिएशन है वो जनरली पूरा नेगेटिव नहीं है। मैं मानती हूँ कि काफी हद तक नेगेटिव है क्योंकि हम जो आयात करते हैं उसका जो खर्चा है वो बहुत बढ़ जाता है, लेकिन जो निर्यात जो एक्सपोर्ट की जो कम्पिटिटिवनेस वो बहुत बढ़ जाती है। और जैसे मैंने कहा जो बड़े एक्सपोर्टिंग नेशंस हैं वो तो चाहते हैं कि थोड़ा बहुत हमारी जो करेंसी है डिप्रिशिएट हो जाए।
And another story that has been dominating the headlines today is the clarification that the finance minister issued today that the recent decision to hike the GST rates on certain items was taken to curb tax leakage. In a series of tweets, she said the decision was a much needed one to curb tax leakage. She said it was considered at various levels, including by officers, the group of ministers, and was finally recommended by the GST Council with a complete consensus of all members. Ms. Sitharaman said this was a unanimous decision by the GST Council. All states were present in the GST Council when the issue was raised by the group of ministers on rate rationalization in the 47th meeting held at Chandigarh last month. She said all states, including non-BJP states like Punjab, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana and Kerala have agreed with the decision. She said there has been a lot of misconceptions about this which has been spread. The minister said the group of ministers that recommended the changes comprised of members from West Bengal, Rajasthan, Kerala, Uttar Pradesh, Goa and Bihar and was headed by the Karnataka Chief Minister Basavaraj Bommai. The finance minister said when GST was rolled out, a GST rate of 5% was made applicable on branded cereals, pulses and flour. Later, this was amended to tax only such items which were sold under registered brand or brands on which enforceable right was not foregone by the supplier. However, soon rampant misuse of this provision was observed by reputed manufacturers and brand owners, and gradually GST revenue from these items fell significantly. So Sushma ji, the first tweet that she made was that the GST Council had exempt from GST all items specified below in the list, and there are 11 items specified there when sold loose and not pre-packed or pre-labeled. So that will not attract any GST, and those 11 items that were mentioned in the tweet are include all the pulses, wheat, rye, oats, maize, rice, atta, suji, besan, puffed rice and curd or lassi. So there has been a lot of misgivings about this in the media and the general media. So what would you like to say about this?
Well, first of all, I think there are general misconceptions as far as GST rates are concerned, in the sense that there's not much general understanding in the general public, I mean, about the functioning of the GST Council and the way in which GST rates are actually imposed. The fact is that the GST Council is comprised of all the state governments, representatives of all the state governments, and everything, all these decisions as far as GST rates are concerned is always taken by consensus. So sometimes in general conversation, I find people telling me, look, the government has raised the rate. I said, central government. So I said, well, it's not just the central government. It is the GST Council, and the state governments are very much involved in this. So similarly, in this case, when this decision was taken to put, of course, the finance minister clarified that there was already a 5% levy on branded cereals, pulses, flours, etc. The only thing is to make it, because they were having tax leakages, revenue leakages, they probably changed the terminology and made it into pre-packaged and labeled food grains. Now, even this decision was taken by the entire GST Council, which includes all these states, including the opposition states, and some of the opposition states were, as she has pointed out, in the group of ministers which made the recommendations, and these include Rajasthan, Kerala, West Bengal. So this is always a cooperative venture. So I find it personally very strange that the finance ministers of these states were, or the chief ministers of these states were part of this decision-making process, and now they are going back on it. So this is something that, it's a very basic thing as far as GST rates are concerned. All the GST rates are taken in consultation with the states. And as
the minister has clarified that all these 11 items, when sold loose, will continue to be exempt from GST.
Yes. And this levy was apparently already there on branded cereals, pulses, etc. And I think they have now turned it into pre-packaged. The term is being used as pre-packaged, probably to plug revenue leakages.
जी, वित्त मंत्री ने स्पष्ट किया कि जो 11 ये चीजें हैं दैनिक उपयोग की, इन पर खुले में जो अगर ये बेची जाती हैं तो इन पर किसी तरह का कोई जीएसटी नहीं लगेगा। और अब रुख करते हैं एशियाई शेयर बाजारों का। वैश्विक शेयर बाजारों में आज गिरावट रही। अमेरिका के केंद्रीय बैंक फेडरल रिजर्व की सप्ताह होने वाली बैठक की नतीजों की प्रतीक्षा में निवेशकों ने सतर्कता बरती है। जापान के निकेई सूचकांक में 0.7% की बढ़त दर्ज की गई है। हांगकांग का हैंगसेंग 0.9% लुढ़क गया और दक्षिण कोरिया का कोस्पी 0.2% और सिंगापुर का स्ट्रेट्स टाइम्स सूचकांक 0.1% की मामूली गिरावट के साथ बंद हुए। चीन के शंघाई कंपोजिट इंडेक्स में कारोबार लगभग सपाट बना रहा, कोई उतार चढ़ाव नहीं देखा गया। यूरोपीय शेयर बाजारों में कारोबार मिला जुला रहा। लंदन का FTSE 100 0.3% चढ़ा, जर्मनी का डेक्स 0.1% की बढ़त और फ्रांस का कैक 0.1% के नुकसान में रहे।
If you look at the US market, the Wall Street ended lower yesterday after bank stocks erased earlier gains and Apple shares fell on a report saying the company plans to slow hiring and spending growth next year. The Dow Jones Industrial Average Index lost 0.7% while the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq Composite Index both declined 0.8% each. And Sushmaji, as we speak, the US stock futures are slightly gaining right now, and one major result that will come after closing bell today would be the Netflix results. How do you see the US markets in the short term?
Well, I think the US markets are very much impacted by big tech and Apple results. The fact that Apple is going to slow down hiring, taking into account the fact that they are expecting a global slowdown, it has had an impact on the market. And I think that also reflects the fact that there is a general expectation among corporates in the U.S. that the country is heading for recession, given the high level of inflation and the continuation of the Ukraine war, which although global supply chains the disruption has reduced, but the situation is certainly not looking very promising. So the outlook from the point of view of the U.S. is, of course, very disturbing for a country which normally has about 1 to 2% inflation, is now facing 9.1% inflation. So it is something definitely of concern for that country.
Let's look at oil prices. Oil prices today softened after soaring by more than $5 a barrel in the previous session on expectations that U.S. crude inventories may have risen last week. On the other hand, tight supplies and a weaker dollar curbed losses. The crude prices fell around 2% in intraday trade. Brent crude was trading at $104.35 per barrel, while WTI crude prices were at $100.60 per barrel.
और बात सोने की कीमतों की। मल्टी कमोडिटी एक्सचेंज में अगस्त के वायदा कारोबार में सोना आज 75 रुपए की तेजी से 50,435 रुपए प्रति 10 ग्राम रहा। वहीं दूसरी तरफ सितंबर अनुबंध वाली चांदी 150 रुपए टूटकर 55,940 रुपए प्रति किलोग्राम के स्तर पर आ गई। न्यूयॉर्क मर्केंटाइल एक्सचेंज में सोना बढ़त के साथ $1,715.20 प्रति औंस के स्तर पर, जबकि चांदी मंदी के साथ $18.80 प्रति औंस पर कारोबार कर रही थी। सुषमा जी, सोने की बात करें तो बहुत ही 50,000 और 51,000 के दायरे में ही काफी सप्ताह से सोना कारोबार करता दिखाई पड़ रहा है। क्या आगे आने वाले समय में कुछ तेजी की उम्मीद आप देखती हैं इसमें?
देखिए, सोने का ये है, जैसे मैंने पहले भी कहा प्रोग्राम में, सेफ हेवन एसेट है। इस वक्त जियोपॉलिटिकल क्राइसिस है दुनिया भर में, तो ये इसके दाम आगे के दिनों में लगता है कि बढ़ेंगे। लेकिन जैसे मैंने पहले भी आपके प्रोग्राम में बोला है कि मैं सोने की इन्वेस्टमेंट में मतलब फेवर नहीं करती हूँ, लेकिन काफी इन्वेस्टमेंट एनालिस्ट चाहते हैं कि आपको रखना चाहिए।
I know, Sushma ji, you call it a dead asset, but if you have to compare between gold and silver, which one would you prefer right now as an investment? I know both are dead, but
well, probably gold, I would say.
सुषमा जी, हमसे बात करने के लिए और चर्चा के लिए आपका धन्यवाद।
Thank you.
Thank you, Sushma ji, for joining us live in the program and discussing the stories of the day. Before we close this edition of Market Mantra, a reminder of the headlines that we covered. Domestic stocks logged modest gains. Sensex closes above 54,750 points. Nifty settles near 16,350 level. The rupee appreciates to 79 rupees and 95 paise against the US dollar. Global share markets witness losses, and Brent crude prices hover around $105 per barrel mark. That's all that we have in this edition of Market Mantra. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Market